Hello, welcome everyone. So we are at this afternoon's workshop hosted by RecruitBot, the power of AI and ChatGPT in winning top talent. It's what everyone's talking about. Everybody feels very in the dark on what is happening with AI right now, and it's here, it's not going away, and really excited to have Jeremy Schiff here, who is the founder and CEO of RecruitBot. So thank you to Jeremy for providing his expertise. I'm sure a lot of you have questions. They also have a booth if you'd like to ask more questions after the session. But I don't want to take up any of his time, so I want to, again, thank Jeremy and thank RecruitBot for this incredible session. And thank you so much, and take it away, Jeremy.
Thanks for the great intro. So everyone's been hearing, hopefully, about ChatGPT and AI and machine learning, and these are all scary terms of robots that are coming for your jobs, except not really, and no one understands what any of this means. Hopefully, by the end of this chat, we'll have a much better understanding about what all of these different things are, what they actually mean and how they're different from each other, and understanding how that's actually going to be impacting your jobs. The good news is it's definitely not taking your jobs anytime soon. But there are some pretty amazing things that these technologies can do. And by understanding them, it's probably going to change the way that everyone across all industries, but especially across recruiting and HR more broadly, is going to have to sort of change the way that they're working in order to take advantage from a number of these efficiencies. So we're going to be talking a lot, just sort of getting a framework going about what AI is, what machine learning is, what generative AI, which is ChatGPT is a type of generative AI. Then we're going to talk about sort of tools that can be helpful, and then talk about how automation can be coupled with machine learning to really add a lot to productivity. So we're just going to, and also we're going to be focusing a lot on sort of how it's going to be impacting the workplace and how where the weaknesses are, where people are sort of, a lot of the industry is claiming all sorts of different things. I don't think I know of a single company in the HR space that doesn't claim to have AI in some way or another, but some of these technologies are much more impactful than others. So again, we're going to talk about how all of those things are going to interact and how you'll be able to tell the difference, hopefully, by the end of this talk. So a little bit about my background. Why do I have any sort of credibility to talk about this stuff? I did my undergrad and PhD at Berkeley in applied machine learning. My first company was an online photo editor. Think of like Instagram for the web many years ago. The second one was a restaurant recommendation company, which I sold to OpenTable, where I was running machine learning and data science. So I'm actually a machine learning person by trade, not a sort of recruiter or HR person by trade. But I've been the CEO of RecruitBot for the last 5 years or so. And at OpenTable, I found all sorts of, I learned a lot about challenges about hiring really senior machine learning people, and that was what got me excited about learning a lot more about recruiting, which is what made me want to go into start a company that's going to make lives a lot easier in terms of finding and engaging with passive talent, people who are looking for jobs. So we're going to start with just talking a little bit about AI, machine learning, ChatGPT. What are those things? How do they relate? Just so we have a framework so we can talk about sort of everything else that we care about. So I'm sure everyone's sort of reading in the news, and it's getting more and more hyperbolic every day about how AI is going to make recruiters obsolete. Robots are these big scary things. You see weird videos of robots doing backflips now. AI and machine learning are exactly the same thing. AI tools are going to be like very complicated, and only the most sophisticated people are going to be able to use them. The reality is that's not at all the case. And so effectively, it is going to very much change the way that people are working. And what we're actually seeing so far in the market is that that change is actually driving more value and in proportion more higher salaries for example, recruiters. Because if you can now satisfy more roles and you can help fill roles more quickly than you could before, you're now more valuable as a recruiter, for example. And so it's funny that everyone's like, oh no, AI is coming for your job, and it's actually no, AI is coming to double your salary. That should actually be the spiel that people are pushing, because that's actually much closer to the reality of what we're seeing. And every HR organization I know of, especially in the recession market that we're going through now, everyone's under constrained. Everyone is having challenges with not having enough resources available. And so these sorts of tools can really help make your job easier and stop it, at least reduce the feeling that you're underwater all the time. So talking a little bit about some just basic terms. So I'm sure everyone's hopefully in here heard of what an algorithm. An algorithm is just a set of steps that you take to accomplish some sort of goal. So my favorite example is cooking. Believe it or not, every recipe is an algorithm. All it is a set of steps that I do, and if I do the same steps in the same order, I'm going to get the same outcome. And so when you hear about computers doing algorithms, that's literally what they're doing. It's just a set of steps that they're following in a very specific order, and if they do that well, then they're going to go and achieve whatever task that they want. Then there's artificial intelligence. So the difference between most problems and problems that artificial intelligence solves is artificial intelligence is focused on answers that are about better or worse, not about right or wrong. So a great example is, a classic one is chess. There's no right move or wrong move in chess, but there are definitely better moves and worse moves, otherwise there wouldn't be a difference between a grandmaster and me at 6 years old, right? And so AI is really just about anything where you're solving a problem where there are better or worse answers. And so this could be anything from what is the next video to show on TikTok to what is the best resume that I might want to recommend. But then there's machine learning. And the big difference between AI and machine learning is old school AI, and generally the class of AI, is about, as I said, sort of better or worse, not right or wrong. But machine learning is about how you go about or how the computer ends up working out what right or wrong is. So the way AI used to work before is literally an engineer would sit down and code. So for example, let's say I'm going to recommend a candidate. Job title is 3 times more important than education, right? With machine learning, it's actually going to be learning from previous decisions to go and work out what to recommend next. So let's take a very concrete example of at OpenTable, if I'm going to go and recommend a restaurant to you, what I'm really doing is I'm going and looking at all the places you visited before, all the places that you've made reservations, all of the sorts of restaurants that you've clicked on, and I can use all of that information to inform my understanding of what you care about and what you don't, right? Whether or not Ethiopian is something that sounds really fun and exciting for you, or that sounds terrifying and is totally outside the scope of something that you're going to be interested in. One of my favorite examples is you can find out whether or not someone cares a lot about ambiance versus food if you find out whether or not they like if Indian food is a good first date. If people like Indian food as a first date, they care more about ambiance, and vice versa if they don't. So there are all these interesting things you can learn to predict about people based on the decisions that they're making. But the big distinction here is that you're personalizing what you're going to recommend and what you're going to do based on the feedback that you're getting from the system. So AI is sort of a broader class of it could be sort of hand-coded by an engineer or what have you, but machine learning is really going and personalizing the experience to everyone in a very different way, right? I'm sure if everyone pulled up their Instagram feeds, none of your Instagram feeds are going to look anything like each other. That's because the system is personalizing to what's going on. So it's pretty easy to claim AI because AI is just like any sort of algorithm, versus machine learning does require sort of this more sophisticated understanding about what the user's intent is. So I'm going to sort of make an important distinction, which is there's something called discriminative AI, which is a big, scary term, which basically means I'm just trying to discriminate between things. So I'm trying to work out sort of what category something's in. Is it relevant or not relevant? Is it more relevant or is it less relevant? And most machine learning that we've talked about in the last, which has been a sort of big revolution for the last 10 to 15 years or so especially, has been around very specific vertical problems, right? Like, what should I recommend in the news feed? Is this movie a good one via Netflix? Is this a good restaurant on OpenTable? Or in RecruitBot's case, is this candidate relevant to you? And so when we're talking about machine learning, it's really trying to discriminate between categories of things. And so how this works is, I'm going to give an example with just resume recommendations, which is I would have a set of data. So let's take my resume. And then I'm going to have a bunch of decisions that the user has made. So for example, let's say that they've rated the resumes 1 to 5. And 5 means this is a perfect fit for my position, and 1 means it's a poor one. Then what I want to do is I want to take in a new resume that I've never seen before, and I want to generate a predicted score about, is this resume relevant to this position? And so the way this is going to work is I'm going to generate this thing called a model. And all a model is a sort of abstract way for the computer to understand, if I have a model and I have my data, go and make a prediction about whether or not someone is a good fit. And we sort of do this intuitively as humans all the time. Like the world's simplest model would be, if they went to one of these 20 schools, then it's a 5-star, otherwise it's a 1-star. Now that's a horrible model, that's not going to work very well in practice, but to give you an idea of like sort of what's happening underneath the covers, it's sort of something like that, but sort of scaled up 1,000 times. And so what machine learning is doing is it's saying, I want to take in my data, and I want to take in my labels, and then I'm going to sort of use this machine learning to generate a model. And the model's goal is, if I get a new resume, I want to be able to predict with very high accuracy what the label would be. And so literally this is how you test it, which is that you'll go and look at sort of resumes that you know someone's already judged before and be like, hey, I thought this resume was a 5. Was it actually a 5? If so, my model's doing great. If I thought it was a 1, then it's doing poorly. So hopefully this makes a little bit more sense about what machine learning is and sort of what's happening sort of behind the covers. But then there's ChatGPT, which is this even more scary thing that's coming for everyone's job, including software developers, any day now, but not really. So when we talk about discriminative machine learning and discriminative AI, that was categorizing things. Now we're talking about generative AI, which is now I'm trying to generate something new based on what I've seen. And so ChatGPT, so it turns out these generative approaches have also been around for many, many decades. But it's sort of this first one that's really captured a lot of attention because it's been able to sort of solve a much broader set of problems than these sorts of algorithms were able to be in before. But I'm going to show sort of a very different example. Actually, the same company, OpenAI, created something called DALL-E 2 a couple of years before. And it's important to understand that ChatGPT is just a really important example right now, but there are a lot of different companies that are doing very similar work. Google and Facebook and a number of startups are also building sort of very similar technologies. But here's sort of like a weird example, which is I went into DALL-E and I said, I want images of a woman and a robot holding hands, evoking the feeling of doing good for the planet for a 1950s magazine. Like, it's a pretty weird and abstract prompt, but so this is literally what the system provided for me, and this is why I'm saying it's generative AI, because it's generating an image, something new. I'm not sort of teasing between categories. It's generating something new based on what it's seen and sort of the understanding of this is how this text somehow maps to sort of similar images. Does this generally make sense? I'm seeing a little bit of nodding, which is always good. This stuff is scary and a little bit intimidating sometimes. So ChatGPT is doing the same thing, except rather than the DALL-E example where I'm doing images to text, now I'm going to do question to answer. And so the thing that's really different versus a Google or a Bing or something like that is that it's interactive. And so rather than a Google where I do a search and I get a list of results and I'm done, I can do a search and based on what it says, I can refine it. I can say, be more concise. I can say, explain more about this part of what you said. And so it's much more about having sort of an interactive conversation as opposed to what we're used to, which is I do a search, I get a list of things, and either those things are good or I change my search and I sort of move forward. So, so what is actually ChatGPT? And there's actually a pretty good metaphor for what's happening, which is it's actually sort of, it's weird, but it's very similar to what's happening with autocomplete on your phone. So you know how you like type in words and it thinks this is the next word that it's going to be? ChatGPT is actually that on insane steroids. So rather than suggesting this is the next word, it's actually doing, I'm going to go and suggest the next paragraph or the next 500-word essay based on literally the same sort of technology. And instead of sort of being trained on a small amount of data by the way people are interacting with text, it's actually trained on the entire internet. So literally, it's crawling all of the text it can get off of anything you might imagine, any public data everywhere. And then it's going and learning a model for understanding what's going on. And so, for example, I went into ChatGPT and said, describe in one paragraph 3 things that are exciting about AI. And it gave me a paragraph describing exactly what those sorts of things might need to be around sourcing and sort of interviewing and so on and so forth. And again, I could follow up and I could ask it follow-up questions. And so, but hopefully this intuition, I mean, it feels a little bit weird to think about it, but this is why, like, once you understand that it's sort of all it's doing is sort of guessing the next word like it would in sort of text, but on steroids, it sort of gives you a better intuition about like what's actually happening behind the scenes. And so, so you learn it. So it trains a model by learning across the entire internet, and it's learning these sort of concepts and then suggesting paragraphs based on that information. And there is also what's interesting is a tuning step where as users are interacting with these sorts of systems, if anyone's played with ChatGPT yet, there's like a thumbs up and thumbs down. So it's actually taking in that feedback and saying, this sort of answer was actually useful to my question versus wasn't. So it's fine tuning all the time based on what's going on. And so what does this actually mean? So this means that I can go and ask it all sorts of things. I can go and say, write me a 3-drip email campaign that I want to use to go and reach out to engineers. It means that I can say, I literally asked it while in the supermarket, hey, concisely tell me what months artichokes are in season. Like, you can literally ask incredibly weird, open-ended or extended questions. And what's also very interesting is you can use personas. So you can say, pretend that you are a Gen Z person in high school. How would you write this? How would you respond to this? Or assume that you're a consultant with 25 years of experience in SEO. How would you generate an essay to help get me whatever objective that I have? So you can give it a lot of context in the same way that you might sit down with an expert consultant and go and describe things. But what's really important here is it's really good at generating sort of a first pass thing that looks sort of relatively reasonable, but oftentimes it makes all sorts of mistakes. So one of the standard ones is it makes a type of mistake called hallucinating, where it will literally invent facts that are not true. And actually, there's a pretty weird case where a lawyer asked ChatGPT to write a brief for them, and it did, and it sounded really compelling, and it invented a bunch of law articles that didn't exist that they then submitted to the judge, who wasn't very happy about the fact that that was what went down. So there is this really interesting interaction where ChatGPT can be really useful for generating ideas and for sort of, instead of me just writing something from scratch, generating sort of a first version of thing that I can then go edit and massage and ultimately get to the right answer. But it's very far from, I can just blindly trust it that it's going to sort of generate the right thing. And again, the exact same way where if I'm typing in my phone, every now and then it really suggests not at all the right word of what I'm trying to do with autocorrect, right? That gets really weird and frustrating. It's actually very similar here. It's effectively autocorrecting to the wrong concept as opposed to autocorrecting to the wrong word. And so we're going to see a movement towards like editing and human curation and relying on these technologies for the first pass of idea generation. That's one of the first things that we're seeing happening a lot with these sorts of technologies. It is going to be extended with specific applications. We're looking at a number of examples in the recruiting domain. And so your technologies are going to start getting the ability to sort of interact with it and ask questions and answers, as opposed to I just sort of type something in and I get my results and I'm done. I think it's going to really change the way people both generate and obtain information because of this ability to sort of like synthesize information a lot more quickly. But it's also going to lead to all sorts of weird complications where all of a sudden I can generate 10,000 SEO articles by just asking it to do so. And we've already talked about how it's going to hallucinate and make a bunch of weird mistakes. And so if other people are making decisions based on that, it's going to get weird. And so in the same way that hopefully a lot of people are skeptical of what they see on social media, it's going to get a lot more complicated pretty quickly, unfortunately. And then the last part is like conventional interfaces that we're used to are going to become a lot more chat focused. So it's going to start blurring the lines between feeling like I'm texting an assistant on my phone versus I'm interacting with a search engine or using Excel in whatever way I might want, right? So you can imagine that not that far from now, I go and describe to ChatGPT or something like it, I want you to do this crazy thing with my spreadsheet, and it does it sort of 90% of the right way, but I still have to tweak it 10%. And so that's going to change a lot. And so you guys can see there are all sorts of different ways that this might go and affect where things are going to happen. So the main takeaway here is there's a lot of changes that are coming. And we really need to focus as HR professionals on what does this mean? And so the good news is a lot of this technology is actually being really focused on being made simple and accessible, right? Like if I'm logging into ChatGPT, I can just type in anything. And yes, there are definitely ways where I can be better or worse, much like a search engine. There's definitely better searches or worse searches, but it's not like I have to be some amazing computer science expert who needs to know some really complicated code to go and leverage these technologies today. And so sort of staying on top of them and really just going and experimenting with them can help you much more quickly go and understand what it is that these domains might be able to affect what it is that you're trying to do. And again, this sort of other part, which is, as I've said, because of like these hallucination issues, because of like you guys will understand your specific companies, your specific businesses, how to package things specifically for your way. It is good at ChatGPT, and these sorts of technologies are very good at doing things in a broad and sort of general way, but you're going to still need to make it specific and contextually relevant to what you're trying to do. And so that is the value that ultimately more and more is going to be the focus of everyone across every industry, is really sort of focusing in on the part that's relevant to your business and what specific thing you're trying to accomplish. But it'll allow things to happen at a lot bigger scale. And so if I can now write 5 drip campaigns, instead of writing 5 drip campaigns from scratch, I'm now writing 5 drip campaigns but now I'm editing 5 drip campaigns where ChatGPT has sort of generated the first version that's faster and hopefully better, but the outcome is the same. But you can also see that what I'm not saying is that someone blindly types in a question into ChatGPT, they're going to get a really generic answer, and no one would be excited to go and, if I send a set of emails to a candidate that's super generic, you're not going to get a good response anyways. And so, like, the good news is, much has happened with lots of other sort of technologies in the past, your jobs are going to change. But hopefully it'll ultimately mean you are going to be more highly leveraged and being able to be a lot more effective given the resources that you have. And if you're able to hire twice the amount of people, you're probably going to be able to charge more money to go and do that. Talking a little bit more about sort of machine learning in other areas more specifically, where machine learning might be able to have an impact, is things like sourcing of candidates, automatically reviewing resumes, generating outreach and actually doing the automation of reaching out, automatically following up with people, nurturing candidates and continuing to following up with them, building a bench. Or again, there's even things on the time-saving side, which is that now I can spend more time on the phone with candidates rather than more time reaching out to people. I can spend more time focusing on DEI initiatives and making sure that I have a healthy pipeline of the right sorts of people, because I'm not completely overwhelmed with just making sure that I have enough people in the door in the first place. I can better collaborate with hiring managers and make sure that I'm really like in sync with them about what they want and need. Never a fun process for anyone involved. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the truth about AI and sort of like some of the snake oil that we're seeing out there. And I want to be clear, there's a lot of amazing companies building some pretty cool and innovative technology, but a lot of people are just stamping AI on anything and everything. And so sort of a good way to think about the snake oil is the distinction that I was making earlier, which is if they're saying that they have AI, you should really focus on, is this something that's going to be custom tailored to what it is that I'm trying to do and accomplish? Or am I getting a more generic result that everyone else is getting? If I'm getting a more generic result, it is really like AI from the 90s. And the revolution that everyone's been talking about AI is really coupled with machine learning and generative AI. And that isn't sort of the AI that anyone cares about anymore. So it's really useful from a marketing point of view, but it doesn't actually impact your business day to day. And so an example would be that if I'm looking for a software engineer, I would just say, if it's a similar job title, I want to give a score of 5 times 5, and if it's a similar school, times 3, right? Now, some recruiters may be like, that's a really good way of understanding things. Others are going to be like, I care about other things. I care about skills. I care about leadership experience. I care about whether or not they're a job hopper. All of these sorts of things, every single recruiter and every single hiring manager cares about something different. And so what you want is a machine learning system that's actually going to go and work out, how do I care about these criteria for this specific company, for this specific role? And that's where the machine learning comes in, as opposed to the generic AI that you would be seeing out there. And so it's actually not that hard to push vendors on it, and frankly, hopefully the salespeople will be sophisticated enough that are doing more innovative stuff will actually be able to understand it. But if it's not accessible and intuitive, then there's probably something fishy going on, right? Like even something terrifying like ChatGPT, hopefully you guys have a pretty good idea of like what that means and how that's going to go and impact things. It's not, what's happening is very complicated, but the understanding of like what it means and the implications to you is hopefully pretty intuitive. And so similar, like what you should really do is push vendors on how things work. So a great example is concretely, we provide DEI signals. So whether or not, I'll talk a little bit more RecruitBot in a second, but whether or not someone is a woman, let's say that there's imbalance on your marketing team and you need more women on the marketing team. Well, I need to go and find women. Well, the way it works is you look at a bevy of, here are a bunch of names of women, and here are a bunch of names that aren't women, and then I can go and use that to train a model to go and understand, again, to discriminate and slice the difference between these are people who are likely to be women and these are people who aren't. But again, you can understand what underlying data we're using and how we're using it to go and predict whether or not someone's likely to be a woman. Or similar, find a candidate that is similar, who's similar to my roles. I can understand, okay, I'm going to look at a resume and look at job titles and years of experience, et cetera, to go and understand what's going on. And so I can use that data and that information to then go and inform what it is that I'm going to do next. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about RecruitBot and what it is that we actually do relevant to this technology. Hopefully it's a lot more sort of digestible what it is. So RecruitBot is a passive outreach tool. So our job is to help companies find and engage with talent that is not looking for a job, but is open to new opportunities. And it depends by industry and a bunch of other things, but it's generally between like 10 and 20% of people are actually open to a new opportunity at any point in time. And so you want to go engage with these people, but you want to go and engage with them in a scalable way, right? It takes like a lot of the technologies, either I'm reading through a huge number of resumes and most of them aren't relevant, or I'm sort of using the old school way of reaching out to people, and one by one I'm going and sort of enumerating and reaching out to people, which can be very slow and time consuming. And so we have this notion of a flywheel, namely something that's getting momentum and sort of is improving over time. And if you think of like a recruiting funnel, which is what most people are dealing with today, I have a job, I open a rec, I find a bunch of people, I push them through, some percentage of those people get hired, and then I basically start from scratch again. This seems like lunacy to me. What you can actually do is you can leverage all of the previous work you've been doing in order to make it easier for you to do that every time next. And there are two major sort of aspects that go on. So one is that you can use AI and machine learning to help you find more relevant candidates. So similar to how like Netflix is going to go and recommend movies based on other movies you like, we can use a similar approach to go and recommend candidates that are similar to the ones you like. So once I've already found a bunch of candidates, I'm like, great, I found a bunch of relevant candidates. Now when I go and try and fill that role next time, I already have a good understanding of what I'm looking for, so I can spend a lot less time going and finding the people that I'm looking for. The other is around automated, personalized emails. So if I'm sending out enough emails at enough scale, and you have a good tool like RecruitBot, it can give you the analytics to understand Jane's emails have twice the response rate of Bob's for the same role. And so what it means is I want to do a lot more of messaging like what Jane is doing, and I want a lot less messaging like Bob is doing. And so both of these sort of go hand in hand to help each other. I'm getting better and better at targeting who I'm looking for roles, and I'm getting more and more effective at getting those specific people to respond to me and get those people to ultimately have a conversation with me, which is the whole point of RecruitBot. So there are sort of 5 major steps that we use in order to get people to be involved with RecruitBot. And ultimately, it's an end-to-end solution. So it's going to help you from finding the candidates, engaging with them, and understanding all of the analytics to understand how am I improving over time. So step 1 is we have a database as of very recently of 600 million people, which we get by crawling the entire internet and ingesting data from public and private sources. And we allow you to search in all sorts of different ways. So job title, years of experience, education, skills, so on and so forth, but also pretty cool things like DEI or sort of other things like that. And then as I'm searching, the machine learning is going to go and learn what it is that I like that's similar. You can see then in the example here that I'm going and rating candidates. And it's generating those purple stars, which is our prediction about whether or not a candidate is really relevant to you. And so hopefully you can now much more quickly find the sorts of people that you want and make sure that every time you're evaluating a candidate, that person's more and more relevant every time. The second step is engaging with candidates via automated and personalized outreach. So you can run sort of email campaigns as literally as simple as like clicking a campaign. It'll automatically provide template variables, so it'll automatically personalize to the person. I can rapidly go and tweak those messages if I want to do it one by one for super hard to fill roles, or I can literally go and train the machine learning, say go and find the top 50 people that are rated 4 stars or above and send an email blast to all of them in a sort of very quick and effective way. The third step is really understanding what's going on with your outreach and engagement. So you can get a full funnel from finding people to engaging with people all the way through open rates and response rates and really understanding which of those people are ultimately getting hired. And I can drill in and understand this campaign is being much more effective with not just the more effective, but it's more effective because of the open rate, or it's more effective because the messaging is more compelling, or it turns out that the third message in the campaign is really way more effective at converting someone. So if you have the analytics and it's just sort of built into the system, it becomes very easy to understand how do I go and improve what I'm doing over time. The last step is really making it really easy to collaborate with your team. So we make it really easy to tag people, to have notes. We actually have even hiring manager seats, so it's very easy for your hiring managers to get involved. So if, like a lot of recruiters have the challenge of just getting time on the hiring manager's calendar and actually getting feedback when you're trying to go and understand what's going on, now you have an asynchronous way where you can just tag Jane and say, Jane, can you give me more information about like whether or not this candidate is a good fit? And not only that, they can go and rate the candidate 1 to 5, and then that actually is teaching the machine learning as well. So this becomes a really powerful tool where the judgments of the hiring manager can be influencing the decisions directly while coupling that with the recruiter. And it becomes a much more time-efficient way than what I'm used to hearing, where people are taking a bunch of LinkedIn profiles, putting them into a Google spreadsheet and saying, let me know which of these candidates you like and which one you don't. It's just a very frustrating and difficult product, but I'm seeing enough smirking in the audience to know that's how most of you guys are doing it today. And then the last, which is really important, is that we integrate with the other parts of the tech stack that might be important. We integrate with LinkedIn, which makes it really easy if you're finding people through LinkedIn to go and start a drip campaign and email them directly from there as well. So it's not just beholden to RecruitBot's searches. So it can add value on top of your LinkedIn that you're using today. And we also integrate with your applicant tracking system. And so there are a number of different ways we can be valuable there. We can automatically say, I only want you to find people who are outside of my applicant tracking system, versus I only want you to find people in my applicant tracking system, because I'm going to message things very differently, right? One of the most frustrating things I hear from recruiters is they finally find their perfect candidate, and then they go and look in the ATS, and they're like, oh crap, we reached out to them 2 weeks ago. And so automatically being able to filter those people out and not waste your time can be really, really helpful. And similarly, we can automatically, because we're mapping the candidates in RecruitBot to the candidates that are in your ATS, if you have a stale candidate from 3 years ago that actually has moved on to a different job, we can actually automatically understand that. And so we can surface that candidate now, but you still have all of the notes and the context for the interaction that you had in the past, which now makes your ATS a much more valuable resource than it was before. And the last major aspect is obviously we'll automatically export candidates into your ATS so that you don't have to worry about making sure that the people that you're engaging with ultimately are showing up in your ATS and you understand what's going on. And I purposely left 5 minutes because hopefully there are a couple of questions from the audience. Thank you everyone for your time. Yeah, no, sorry, I was just saying thank you and transitioning to the chat section, that's all. So it's interesting. So sorry, just to repeat the question. So the question was, how are people using this sort of technology and pulling information about which of these candidates were ultimately successful in their roles to go and sort of help me understand what's going on with potentially new, I'm assuming potentially new candidates I might want to source, or just even understanding what's being more effective inside of the organization. So it turns out we actually used to have a feature that would allow you to automatically teach the system to automatically bootstrap what you were looking for based on who you had hired in the past. And the most interesting thing that we learned was people's understanding of what roles they're looking for evolves much more rapidly than you might anticipate. And so what people thought they wanted 6 months ago for a marketing person is actually different now than it was back then. And so it was more important to make it incredibly low friction to just judge a bunch of candidates in 15 minutes and say, find me other people that are similar than that, rather than trying to understand whether or not someone is going to be a good fit relative to their performance. The other half is a lot of AI and machine learning makes sort of other claims which are frankly just not really feasible or possible. And so there's a reason that even the smartest people I know, no one's going to look at a resume and make a hire based on the resume, right? There's a reason there's an interview process. There's a reason that you speak to them and you get better understanding of who they are as a person and what's most effective to them. And so the point of the machine learning is to really work out, here's a pool of candidates, and hopefully especially a couple of diamond in the rough candidates, ones that are going to be great for your organization, that are sort of only okay for other organizations, that are going to get you, that's going to lead to an exciting conversation. But there's no way we're going to know whether or not someone's a great culture fit, whether or not someone has the true skills that they want based on the resume. Our job is just to open the door and get a conversation job going. It's the recruiter and hiring manager's team's job to go and work out whether or not you should hire them. And again, this gets back to the previous point of like, there's no way technology is ever going to replace interviewing people. It's just not going to happen. So like, be clear on where it can go and add value, and be clear on where it can't. Any other questions? Lady in the red? Yeah, so the question was, I understand how you can search by female names and male names, but are there ways to remove bias from your search? And so actually, that's a lot of the reason that I started the company, and that's actually what the machine learning is actually particularly focused on. If you get a time-pressed recruiter and you tell them go and make a hire, they're going to type in the 3 obvious job titles, and then they're going to type in MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, MIT, and they're going to get no responses from everyone, because that's what every hard-pressed recruiter is doing. And then and obviously, it should be trivially obvious to everyone in this audience why that's going to be a really biased experience and you're not going to get the right people. So the machine learning that we've built is not focused on those sorts of things. It doesn't even understand the name. Or actually, our software doesn't even have faces in the product. I've literally had a recruiter ask me, can you add faces because I know what a smart person looks like, which was like one of the most terrifying things I've ever heard. But we get questions like that all the time. And so the point here is that the machine learning will focus on what really matters to a specific position for a specific individual or for a specific company, which is going to be focused on the attributes that ultimately matter. And I want to be clear here, we're not getting rid of bias. That's actually impossible to do. But what we're doing is the software and the automation is going to dramatically remove a lot of the bias or lessen the bias relative to what would have happened on your own. And so from all parts of the process, from helping me reach out proactively to making sure that I'm filtering out only the people that are not relevant, these are all things that matter along the way. We care about this so much, we even have a feature that will hide names. So even if we recommend a candidate to you, you can't actually see the name until you've gone and reached out to that person, so on and so forth. So diversity is something I personally care a lot about, and so we spend a lot of time being thoughtful about it, especially because there have been a lot of times where people have, again, especially if you're doing the hard-coded AI algorithms of the past, it's really easy to do things wrong. And I'm really glad that the industry cares about these things. Woman in the black jacket? For sure. Yep. Sure.
Right? So I get it about bias, and I get it about other ways like schools and other ways in which that's from.
Yep.
Don't you think, so let's say you are doing the woman specific, whatever it means, right? How does that account for it if names don't necessarily allow gender?
So that's a great question. So just to repeat the question, again, in a paraphrased way, it's people have all sorts of different names, and a name like Taylor or a name that might be African in origin that's not used to like a classic sort of Bob, Joe, Sue sort of name, how are we going to be thinking about those things? So first of all, the AI is not perfect. We aim for about 95% accuracy, but we're never going to claim that it's going to be perfect, but it's a lot better than what actually people do, which is that they just go and get a list of 300 names and they put a Boolean search in and they get a lot poorer stuff out. So there are two sub-questions in there. So the first one is, how do I deal with Southeast Asian names and African names and non-sort of classic Western names? The short answer is that the data sets that we're procuring are worldwide. They're not US only. So I don't know if a specific African name is more gendered one way or the other, but if it's strongly gendered one way or the other, we'll probably capture it. We're sort of striving to get better all the time, but it is something we invest in and care about. There's a second category of thing, or example, which you said, Taylor. That's actually the cliche example people give, which it turns out it's 51% women and 49% men. So it doesn't get worse than that. The short answer is we leave those people out. So if there's a name that is gendered ambiguous like that, we err on the side of making sure that we don't make a mistake. But it is just sort of a limitation of these systems, and we're open about that. And again, it's not about removing bias, and it's not about it's about making it easier to sort of reach out to ethnically diverse and gender diverse, and basically any type of diversity that might be relevant, and pushing the envelope there. But we'll continue to get better over time. Excuse me. An example might be, I might find Taylor, but in the resume it may say that she was part of the Female Engineers Association of America. Now I know that Taylor is a woman, and I can go and sort of do something better and smarter. So we're improving this stuff all of the time, using as much information as we have about the person. But those are the corner cases that we worry about every day. Sorry, I've got to wrap up, but I'm happy to take questions either at the RecruitBot booth or after the talk. I love talking about this stuff. I can do it all day.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, and that is